All right. So tell me a little bit about yourself and how you got involved in the mental health community and psychology community.
Okay, well, it's a bit of a long story, but I suppose I'll start when I was in college, I decided to study psychology, was very much interested in learning more about um, mental health, learning how to support people who had mental illnesses. But I also had a real passion for working with kids. So when I graduated from college, I decided to pursue um, I decided to go to work and then pursue a graduate degree in psychology. I wasn't quite sure what I was going to do in graduate school yet, but I did work as a preschool teacher for about 4 years, and I really, really enjoyed that. And decided in that time, after doing some research, that I wanted to study school psychology and school counseling. Um, the reason being that I really wanted to devote more of my time to helping individual children. And I thought that would allow me the opportunity to do that. Um, and I also thought that schools would be a really good place to work with kids, given that that's where they spend most of their time. So I graduated with two graduate degrees. One was a master's in school counseling, and the other is an educational specialist degree in school psychology. With those degrees from Seattle University, I then moved into an internship and then launched my career as a school psychologist and school counselor. I did that job primarily working with kids in kindergarten through sixth grade for 15 years in one school before I moved on to doing some other work, some of which was at the administrative offices in the school district where I worked, assisting the Department of School Psychologists by training interns, by leading professional development and other leadership opportunities. And then, let's see, I became a licensed mental health counselor um, following about 20 years of working in the public schools. I decided to get my credential to work one-on-one with kids in a mental health setting. It's different than working in the schools. As a school psychologist, my primary role has been to help identify students in need of special education services. So I was the leader of a team of folks that did those evaluations. I also provided one-on-one and small group counseling, crisis intervention, and support for families. But in my work as a licensed mental health counselor, I'm primarily working one-on-one with kids, and then I am also doing some parent coaching. So that was my long answer to your one question.
Yeah, that's good. So like what kinds of things what services do you provide as a school psychologist and mental health? I understand that you're also a mental health advocate, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, that's part of my work too. So there's so many facets to the jobs that I've done and am still doing. I'll say that my work as a school psychologist primarily involved doing testing, assessments, observations, uh, and eligibility evaluations for students. And my work as a school counselor really involved being uh, part of the school community in classrooms, running groups, supporting kids who are having social emotional difficulties. Um, and then, of course, my job as a mental health therapist is really to support support individual clients' uh, mental health and help them to work towards specific goals that they identify as important to them. As an advocate, which I feel like I'm an advocate in all the jobs I do, but in my role as a licensed mental health counselor, I do offer to help support parents as they go through the process of having their children evaluated. And that can be a really scary thing for many parents. You know, I've been doing this job for many years, and it's hard to remember all of the information that I need to know to do my job. So it's, you know, you got to understand parents are completely foreign to some of this. A lot of the jargon, how kids are assessed and determined eligible for services, what to do if they're not, you know, what an IEP is, how to make sure you are, as a parent, being adequately informed and involved in the decision making for your student. And I have to say that my advocacy, the way in which I advocate for students, has shifted a bit since becoming a licensed mental health counselor. Meaning I tend to look at disability differently. And it's not because I'm now a licensed mental health counselor. I think it's just because of the work that I have done around really understanding neurodiversity as a concept, and the neurodiversity, the paradigm and movement, and really just trying to be more aware of my own ableism, as well as the ableism built into the system in which I've worked for 23 years. So it's a lot of unpacking, you know,
Mm-hmm.
a lot of examining
Mm-hmm.
of assumptions, beliefs, practices, and what do I want to do with that? And how do I want to be, you know, an affirming, supportive therapist?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So any stakeholders that you partner with in the psychology, mental health realm?
Mm. Well, I did, I was very involved several years ago, I guess it would be about 2017, in a project in my school district to identify through committee work. So I was a leader of a committee whose job was to help evaluate the best programs out there for social emotional learning, and to make a recommendation to the school board based on the research we did, and what we found other districts were doing. And so I was very involved with that, and we had to do a lot of stakeholder meetings with teachers, parents, many different interest groups, and we had to get their involvement and buy-in, and it was a long, complicated process, but very rewarding. So that's the first thing that came to mind when you asked about stakeholder involvement. Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So like my next question here is how can really mental health and like psychology, just really help people, who are struggling? Because I know like a lot of people, especially during the pandemic, have have had a lot of mental health issues with all the anxiety and stress going on in the world. So my question is, so like how can really the psychology really help those people who are struggling?
So how can psychology or mental health therapy help people who are struggling with things like anxiety that
Yes, yeah.
was really so pronounced during and following at least the initial stages of the pandemic, right? Because I don't know if we're fully out of it, but well, I think we saw what happened. What became evident really quickly is not only were people struggling tremendously, but there weren't enough of us to go around. People had a really hard time finding therapists. So I think what stands out to me is really the importance of, when people are struggling with their mental health, of finding someone they can trust and connect with. And that is hard. It's hard enough to find mental health therapists, but I would say if you don't connect with someone the first time, don't give up, keep trying, right? Not everyone's going to be a good match. But when you do find that good match, it should make a big difference, because it really is the relationship that matters most, I think, in your work with a clinician. You really have to feel comfortable and like you can trust them. Not that you won't ever be uncomfortable, because it's often uncomfortable work to go to therapy. You're talking about difficult things. Sometimes there's some trauma. And you might have to confront some things within yourself that are not easy to look at or talk about. But I would say don't give up if it's hard to find somebody.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think like finding help can really like make a difference.
Yeah, it really can. I know it's made a difference for me in my life. I've been helped by therapists in the past. I've also tried to work with therapists that I've thought, I don't think this person's for me. And that's okay, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think the one thing I hear often, which is discouraging, is that sometimes people will give it a try and then say, oh, therapy doesn't work for me because it wasn't the right match, or, and in some cases that may be true. Maybe therapy isn't the thing for you. Maybe it's something else that you need to do that could help you to feel less anxious, or like you can manage things better.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm biased, having been helped by therapy, and the fact that that's the job I do. So yes, I will say, give it a shot.
Yeah, because in my experience, I see like a therapist every now and then, and so
Mhm.
that kind of really has helped me sort of look at, what I'm concerned about, what kind of doubts that I have, and it has really helped me sort of figure out how I want to like navigate my life, because, you know, it has helped me a lot with, from my
Good.
personal experience.
Yes, I'm glad to hear that. And everyone could use help from time to time. Even counselors. Counselors go to counselors, right? And I think one of the most helpful things that I learned from talking to a counselor early on in the pandemic, when I was going through a hard time, is to have compassion for myself and not to be so hard on myself. I didn't even think that I was being hard on myself, but we all have these voices in our heads, right? Our critical, our inner critic that sometimes, we put ourselves down and think that somehow we're falling short, or
Yeah.
we're disappointing someone, or that we pissed
Yeah,
them off, whatever it is. But really, we're all working hard through tremendously difficult times, and we need to sometimes give ourselves a break.
yeah,
Treat ourselves the way we might treat a friend who is down and out, right? We
yeah,
would come and say, well, work harder.
yeah, yeah, yeah. But like I said before, people who are struggling really need that help, and that kind of helps them guide throughout the course of their lives. Yeah, it can really make a difference.
Yeah, yeah. And these podcasts and social media and other ways in which people have connected, especially, during the early uh, pandemic years, they just needed so much to connect and relate to others. So there are other ways
Mm-hmm.
if therapy isn't immediately accessible to you, or you're having a hard time finding someone.
Yeah, yeah. It very important.
Mm-hmm.